Danielle, thank you so much for hosting this event, which I think is very important for those of you who didn't get to go to the Black Women in Clinical Research Conference that happened this past November 8th to the 10th. It was very, very amazing. And so what we're going to talk about today is a role that we don't really hear that much about, which is clinical safety analyst. So you can raise your hand and drop in the chat who's ever heard of that term, heard of that role, or even knows how that impacts clinical research. And so we're definitely going to do that. But before I take it away, because I always get started first, I have to introduce my co-host, my co-hostess with the mostest. And if you saw us, we literally act the same way we do on Zoom as we do in person. Courtney Smith, if you want to say some words before we get started.
Yes, I want to say hi, everybody. Glad to be back. We had a time. We had a time at the conference. If you didn't make it, I am so sorry. And I hope you can make it next year. But we're back like we never left. So let's get started, Tiff.
I'm ready for it. Okay, so I already have some questions that I'm going to be asking, but again, also feel free that as we're talking to Courtney and Shelda, if you think of anything, and there's no such thing as a stupid question, again, I behoove you all to sign up for BWICR's 3rd annual conference next year, because we got so much information learning from people in different roles in clinical research. So please feel free to ask any question that you want to. So before we get started with actual questions about this role, I would like Shelda and Courtney to introduce yourselves. And I want you to just kind of start with, your education and kind of how you even got into clinical research and how that role came to be for you. So I'm going to start with Shelda. Shelda, if you'd like to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about you.
Good evening, ladies. My name is Shelda Milka, and I'm a PA by training. I would say, well, I'm from Florida. I'm from Deerfield Beach, Florida, and I went to undergrad at the University of Florida. While there, I took up a job as a research assistant. So at the time, there were, ads for clinical studies and stuff. And there was one that seemed like it didn't involve too much craziness. So I signed up. And after signing up, I was asking about, okay, well, the people who conducted the study, what were they doing? And so I found out they were research assistants, and I asked if they had any jobs. So that's how I came to be a research assistant in the dental school on a study that was on TMJ, actually. For 2 years, I was planning to go to PA school, so I continued to do what I needed to do. I went to PA school at Duke, where afterwards I practiced for 9 years, just about 9 years, in urgent care, neurology, and then my last clinical field was in sleep medicine, which is a very subspecialized field. Afterwards, I decided I wanted to change, and so I talked to some lovely Black women in clinical research who kind of helped me align myself and, options that were out there. And I got plugged in with AbbVie, and now I'm working as a clinical research assistant. I'm not a clinical research assistant, Lord, clinical safety analyst, where I've been for a little over 1.5 years.
That is an amazing story. Also, I dropped in the chat for you, Shelda, that I'm a Tar Heel, so I'm not going to hold that against you because I heard the word Duke, but it's okay. It's okay. Don't worry about it. We're still here together.
I'm a Gator girl at heart, number one.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, you know what? Then we're on common ground. Common ground. Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm pretty sure we're going to have some more questions as this evening goes on, just about your journey and what that looked like for you. So I would like to turn it over to Courtney. If you can tell me a little bit tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to be in this role.
Yeah, so my journey to clinical safety analyst was very zigzag, I'll say. I actually started off as an undergrad. I majored in finance, actually, but I made a little pivot. So I wanted to be a doctor, grew up wanting to be a doctor, and started off as a pre-med major at University of Delaware. That is my hometown, Wilmington, Delaware. I'm very proud of that. Very proud of, we elected our first Black woman senator this year. So I was very proud of my hometown. So went to University of Delaware and decided maybe after my first semester that I don't think I want to be a doctor anymore. And I've always loved working with numbers and data, and I was really into investing in the markets and things like that. So thought I wanted to go to New York and be a stockbroker. So anyway, I switched my major to finance, graduated with a finance degree, did auditing for internal auditing for a couple years. Then I went into real estate market research. In the meantime, the tug to go into medicine was still there. And I decided, I don't know if I want to go to medical school. So I don't know. So I went back and did my prerequisites and ended up applying to PA school, thinking I wasn't going to get in. I said, I'm going to apply to one school. And if I get in, I'll go. If I don't, then that's okay. I'll try again next year. I'll apply to more schools. And I ended up getting in to Drexel University in Philadelphia. And came out of there, and my plan was actually to go into urgent care, similar to Shelda's experience, but through a classmate of mine at Drexel who had a mutual friend of mine, we shared a friend. I did not know this girl. She was in Charlotte working in the emergency department. They had just lost 2 PAs, and she said, hey, I know this girl, even though she didn't know me. I know this girl who's looking for a job in Charlotte. And they ended up interviewing me and hiring me. And I took the opportunity because at that time, hiring a new grad into the emergency room was not a very common thing. So even though women's health was my passion, I was like, I'm going to go work in the ER and I'll get to see a little bit of everything. So fast forward, intending to only work in the ER for 2 years. I ended up there for 12 years. And then in 2019 is when I decided that I wanted to do something different with my career. I felt like I had reached a plateau as far as what I was going to learn. And quite frankly, I felt like I was stagnant and just started thinking about what else can I do with this clinical knowledge and this very expensive degree. So in 2019 is when I discovered Black Women in Clinical Research as a Facebook group. And from there, I just started listening to all the different talks like the ones we're having tonight. So it's kind of surreal that I'm a speaker tonight, because I remember in 2019 and 2020 through the pandemic, I was in a place of what am I going to do with my life? And just trying to learn about all the different things I could do. So it actually put me it really was a turning point for me, and just seeing that, okay, you do have options. So I credit Danielle and her stepping out, in faith and starting this organization. I really do. So yeah, so after that, I feel like I'm talking a long time. I'm sorry. After that, had a baby. I had a pandemic baby. And so I was on a career transition and had my second child all at the same time. I'm crazy. I thought, this transition to clinical research certainly is going to be easy. I've got all this clinical knowledge. I've got a master's degree. No, it was not easy. I was caught in between being overqualified by credentials, but underqualified in that I didn't have clinical research experience. So after I had my baby, actually before that, I took a job with CVS. They were starting up their clinical trial services division. And a recruiter reached out to me on LinkedIn. I got a clinical trials management certificate just to prove, that I'm interested in really making this transition. I'm serious about it. And then a recruiter reached out to me and said, hey, we're looking for a provider in Charlotte. We're starting this new thing. I said, okay, great. So I did that for about 8 months. Then I had my baby, took a year off, went to a CRO, and that was through someone in Black Women in Clinical Research that was looking out, and got an interview for a remote site monitor position. At the time, they did have a clinician to CRA program, but I wasn't interested in traveling at that time because I had a new baby. So I worked remotely as a monitor for a year and a half. and then ended up at AbbVie after that. Also, credit to Danielle for her relationship with a recruiter there. And yeah, and I'd actually connected with a director there before that. So it wasn't as easy as it sounded. They weren't hiring at first, but I kept in touch. You know, I stayed persistent. And, you know, when they had an opening, they interviewed me and I got it. So that's my very zigzag journey to clinical research.
I tend to find that a lot of people have that journey, right? Where it's like you have this one goal. We all do, right? When we go to college, graduate school, whatever, we think like, I have this idea, I want to be a doctor. That's a lot of us, right? Not mine, trust me. But we want to have all these things. But what I want everybody to do in the chat, don't have to say it, drop what you do now and drop what you want to do, okay? And what you want to be and what that looks like for you. And thank you so much for sharing that, Courtney and Shelda, and that, you know, our experiences kind of lead us into a direction of what we're looking for. And it's not always straightforward. It's not, right? So I don't think I knew you were a PA, and I stalked LinkedIn. So I must have glanced over that part about you. Yeah, please drop in the chat and get to know each other, right? I want this to be like very interactive for all of us to not only get to know Shelda and Courtney, but also to know each other. You never know. Your network is your net worth. You heard how Courtney just said how Danielle gave her pathways and links and networks to all these other people. So make sure you do that. So now let's get into the actual conversation. So I'm going to start with you, Shelda and Courtney, even though you all have the same role, but you can tell the audience how it's different for each of you. But Shelda, if you can give us a day in the life of Shelda. So like, what does your day look like as a clinical safety analyst? What does that look like?
So for me, I actually typically think about like the tasks that I have to do more on like a week basis. So instead of kind of like, okay, on this day, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, it's more like, okay, for this week, this is what I need to get done. What I would say is kind of pretty regular is once I log in, and our department is remote. So everyone outside of, we have our team in Romania, they have to go into the office, but aside from that, everyone else is remote. So, you know, I log in usually like around about 9 o'clock most days, you know, give and take, more on the take, but around 9 o'clock. And since part of our role is also, you know, assessing adverse events, serious adverse events, usually the first thing I'm doing is checking my email as far as like, you know, what has kind of transpired overnight. Are there any new events going on, you know, that I need to kind of urgently address or report on, should I say. So my first hour is usually that, looking at my email, seeing if there's anything that happened overnight. And since our company is global, you know, we do have teammates that are in other countries. So they might do work or respond to things, you know, in our overnight time, which is their work time. So kind of doing that. Every week I make a to-do list of things I need to do for the week. So I'll consult that also on a day-to-day basis to see what do I need to get done today that can contribute to that list. Outside of that, then most of our work is really kind of looking in databases, analyzing data. So depending on which of my studies might be kind of taking precedence at the time, on a particular day, I might be preparing for some type of presentation or report that I may need to give later that week or the following week for a certain study. Or I might be responding to queries or issuing queries about safety data. And then we will have meetings with function, whether it might be meetings that you have with your TAMD or therapeutic area medical director. So maybe you're meeting with them and kind of discussing as a whole, you know, what the safety status is like on subjects. Perhaps you might be meeting with someone in a different cross function. You know, maybe you have a new study coming up and you might need to meet with someone on, you know, the coders, let's say, and they're gonna have. I had a meeting earlier today with the coders about how they're gonna code certain medications for my study that's upcoming. So those types of meetings with cross functions, within functions, and then also we also do a lot of like trainings as well. So it might be a knowledge session that I might be attending. So I feel like I have at least a meeting a day, and sometimes they can be like 5 or 6. So that tends to that. I have a blocked out time for lunch on my schedule. So at 1 o'clock Eastern, I might be at this computer, but you're not going to be talking to me. So that's happening. And I have my thing, automatically blocked off that I'm in the meeting, which is my break time. So I'll do that. And then the afternoon is kind of really more dedicated to like wrapping up things from the morning. Or if I need to kind of get prepared for things for the next day.
That sounds like a lot. So for those of you who love that, God bless you and Godspeed. So my next question, so along with that, Courtney, is because I want to kind of talk more about your day-to-day and that you have this clinical experience, right? You were a PA, you did all these things. Tell us how you being a PA impacts your role that you do and how that is beneficial, those transferable skills. But also, I know a lot of us, I am not a clinician by trade at all. That's not even my background. And what kind of skills you think you use that, maybe I didn't use that when I was a PA, but I'm using that now. So like in your day-to-day, how do you incorporate both your PA skills and skills that you didn't even know you had to be able to get your data done?
Yeah, so as a provider, you do have to use your critical thinking.
Rihanna too.
And we still do. I use critical thinking every day. A bulk of our job, like Shelda said, when we're not in a meeting or we're not doing a training, or checking our emails and responding to, something or closing out queries that we've issued to the site, we are doing medical review. And to do that effectively, it's more than just looking at what the site has entered into the electronic data capture system, the EDC, for those of you who don't know. It's more than just looking at that to see, okay, they didn't fill in that field or that's missing. We're really looking at the data to see if what they put in about this adverse event makes sense also. Is it, does it make sense from a clinical standpoint? Like I can give you an example that's happening right now. We're trying to, because some adverse events are non-serious and some are serious. Serious events, the patient may have been hospitalized or it's a life-threatening thing. And, they had this particular subject had a worsening of their condition that required a surgery, but the site is trying to say it's elective. And we're like, no, that, from a clinical standpoint, that really doesn't make sense, right? If your, disease worsened, then you required a hospitalization, then, so things like that, you just have to look at, the different events and see if, everything makes sense. Because at the end of the day, if the data doesn't make sense, then that affects, the credibility of the data. And, ultimately that could affect your drug getting to market. So, having that clinical knowledge is really helpful. I think myself, Shelda, we have another PA, and then it's probably everybody else are registered nurses. I think we've got a lot of nurses in our department. So I think they get that clinical knowledge is, I think they look for that. So yeah, that critical thinking, communication, orally and written, we're responding to emails. We have to communicate with the sites. We don't have, the CRAs, they have direct contact with the sites, whether it's by phone or in person. We have no contact with the sites, except through a query that we're issuing, so we're communicating just in that way. But we work cross-functionally a lot, like Shelda said. We may have to reach out to the CRA to, help us get the site to respond to our queries, in a timely manner. So, and then we're meeting with our therapeutic area MDs. So you have to be able to communicate with, people, on your level, and I guess, a level above you. You just have to be
Right.
comfortable doing that. We have to present to them, on a bi-weekly or monthly basis, depending on, what kind of study you're on. So,
Mhm.
just your communication skills, being flexible. Our company is big on agility. So being able to, you may have
Yeah.
something planned for your day, but something else may come up and you got to pivot. And, so time management, like you said, it sounds like a lot. It can be, depending on how many studies you have, how many studies you're leading versus how many you're back up on. So you have to be able to prioritize your time for sure and figure out, okay, what needs to be done now versus what can wait until tomorrow or what can wait till next week, So those are the things.
Yeah. No, I would just say that time management is huge in terms of like clinical research in general. But what you brought up, and I want you both to answer this question because, a lot of times, because I also like teach clinical research to aspiring clinical researchers, I train investigators, and everybody always tells me the reason why they got into clinical research is because they want to help people. They have a personal story and all of that.
Mhm.
But once you get to the day-to-day, I in regulatory never see a patient. I never see a patient. So I don't know, honey. I have no idea what I do. I just know it impacts, right? So what I want to ask you is that what makes you wake up every day and how do you think that your role, I think I already know it because you kind of answered it, but just to drive it home, what do you think your role as a clinical data analyst and senior clinical data analyst impacts clinical trials and bringing drugs to market? I already know, but I think it's a very underserved role that we probably should know more about. So I'm interested to hear what you both have to say about that. And either one of you can start first. Oops, sorry.
Okay.
I'll start with Shelda. Kind of just let me know how you think this role really impacts the whole clinical trial process.
Sure. So first I want to make a point of clarification. So the role is actually clinical safety analyst. We do work
Oh
with
my God, I
clinical
keep
data
doing
analysts
that.
as well,
Yeah,
which is
I'm
fine.
sorry. No, it ain't fine.
Not
Girl.
confuse anybody, but
Clinical safety analyst. Sorry.
yes. And I meant to mention this earlier, I think someone in the chat said they're in a similar role, it'll have kind of different naming conventions, medical reviewers, safety specialist, all different names like that. But essentially the thing is that, what we do informs the safety profiles of drugs. So, I like to, when I'm kind of big picture explaining to people what I do is that, when you take Tylenol and it says, may affect your liver, may, cause this or that, the work that we do on a day-to-day is what leads to being able to put that label or those directions on something as simple as like a Tylenol that you use every day.
Yes, and I've literally been driving that home, and I think because I've talked to so many data people in the past week, that's why I'm getting confused. So I want to make sure, please drive that home and always correct me. And also any of you, just like with our names and all of that, always correct if something is not right, right? So thank you so much for doing that because clinical safety is different than clinical data. It just is, right? On a fundamental level, it just is. So thank you so much for clarifying that. Courtney, what would you like to add to that in terms of like the impact that you make? Because again, and when I teach, I always say, what is the main goal of clinical trial? Patient safety. I always say that, right? And so like, I know that you're a fundamental piece of that, but what is your take on that?
I mean, I think Shelda really nailed it home, but I mean, basically the work that we do is just the foundation of helping to ensure the integrity of the trial, right? If you don't have data that people can rely on and trust, that's accurate, complete, makes sense, can tell the story in the way that it needs to be told, because ultimately that data goes into a clinical study report, which ultimately goes out to government agencies. And, so, we write at some point in the process, we may have to write narratives that go into that clinical study report of the events that have occurred. So that is basically how you get a drug to market. It has to be proven to be safe and effective, but safe is paramount, because if it's not safe, it's not, going to go out there, hopefully.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we've seen drugs that have been rescinded. They've got
Mhm, mhm.
approval
Exactly. And
back.
that's another thing too. Even, it's, we're doing clinical trials, but it's also post-marketing too. So,
Right.
getting information about drugs that have already been there and also assessing that too, for the same thing, to make sure that it's safe even after it's already been out.
Yes, yes. So let me ask you this question. So when it comes to challenges, right? And this is not like a personal challenge when it comes to your job, right? But in terms of being a clinical safety analyst, what are the most common challenges you face? Because I can only imagine you deal with many different sites, many different investigators, many who have their own clinical determination of what is safe or not, and you have to say, hard stop, or let's talk about it. So and maybe just give us not an example of a specific drug, but maybe what do you think is the most common challenge that you face? Like, okay, I got to go through this again. That you feel like you have to always constantly explain to your colleagues, not even to people like us who don't know your role, but like colleagues that you have. So I'm gonna let you take that, Courtney. What do you got?
So I would say, and I've been in the role for what, 6 months now? Maybe almost 7 months, 7 months or so. So I still consider myself a
Shelda,
newbie.
don't be
But
sipping your imaginary tea back.
Oh, you were talking to yourself, not us. I was like, you don't know.
about 7 months, so I'm still a newbie and still learning. So, but what I will say is, like you said, you're dealing with, you know what? Let me go back. So, as a clinician, I think one of the challenges that I have is I still have to use my clinician brain as far as the critical thinking and, trying to piece the puzzle pieces together. But sometimes I'm looking at the data and I'm just like, that's what the PI decided, that's not clinically significant, because I think it is, but that's not my decision. So, it's just, going along with something that I may disagree with clinically, but ultimately, he has oversight of a trial, what's going on. So I think wanting to challenge certain things from a clinician perspective, but that's not what I'm there to do. And then also, when we do, a large part of our job is issuing queries when things don't make sense, when things are missing, when things don't make sense. So, if the site comes back with an answer that isn't quite what we expect to get, which happens a lot, that can be challenging. But again, we can, get with our monitor and say, hey, can you, there's a more official way to say it, to do this and make this request, but we can ask them to, can you work with the site to help them, resolve this. And I'm just going to speak on a personal challenge with this job. I'm not the most technologically savvy person. I can work my way around the electronic medical records, and that's all I had to do for 12 years. But just learning Outlook and OneNote and all the systems that we use to do the data analysis and pulling these reports. So for me, that's just a personal challenge. But I think anyone coming into this position needs to be comfortable with technology, and things are going to change on you. They may use one system and then they say, oh, this isn't working, so we're going to switch to this. So I think just that can be challenging. Change is good, but sometimes it's like, if it's not broke, why are we fixing it? But sometimes it is broken, it needs to be fixed. So
So
that can be a challenge also.
I'm glad you brought that up. So I'm going to segue 2 seconds into to your resume. Whenever I talk to any of you, if you ever had a resume review for me, I always tell you, when you're very specific about what software platforms you use, it may not have any impact on the new job you're going to, because they don't use it. So it means moot to them. So we would much rather know how to use a clinical trial management system,
Right.
than Viva Vault or Metadata Rave or whatever, clinically, whatever, all those things. Now that it's not good. But anyway, I'm glad you said that. You know what? I thought I knew this, but I don't even use it. So now I'm at a whole nother space.
Right. So like you said, just be comfortable with navigating your way around an EDC or a CTMS, just be comfortable, doing that.
Right. So before I turn it over to Courtney, because she's like, Tiffany, girl, you're talking too much. And y'all will be thinking that too. If you were at Wind Down Wednesday, you just talked to me yesterday. But so Sheldon, here's my question for you, because I want to again apologize for keep saying data. However, I'm gonna bring data up one more again, just one last time. In that, because you are clinical safety, you do see like maybe data, right? When they do the data analysis and all these things, but you are really the one looking at the safety of it all, right? And so what is your role? Like, how do you collaborate with data, right? With data analysts, data management, and all of that when they aggregate this data, even though you've been doing this operational, like I see this, I know what's happening, I'm building these reports, and then you see that. So like, but maybe I guess the bigger question is, how do you collaborate cross-functionally with other departments when it comes to the work that you do? And because I know it's important, and I know that you have a valid impact in that. And so if you can kind of just talk to us about where that kind of crosses over a little bit, overlaps, even though it's totally different. And I'm gonna make sure I say that again, different. But I do feel like if there was some data report, you're like, honey, I was
Yeah.
doing this. So
Yeah, I mean, in essence, you know, you could also say that, you know, by nature of being a clinical safety analyst, you also are kind of a data analyst as well. So, you know, they're in our department, you know, the CDAs, they're within our department. So we work very closely together. So it's not even a cross function in our case. It's really kind of, you know, similar functions. I really can't tell you that I know exactly what all their role does.
I was about to say that too. I can't tell you
Yeah.
exactly what they do.
Yeah, I just know that, you know, they're around, they kind of overlap with some of the stuff that we do, but essentially I do, like I said, we're managing data by nature of being in this safety role. You know, data is all you're doing. You're looking at data, you're looking at Excel, you're looking at our analytical systems, pulling reports. So to some degree, kind of to your question, you know, usually depending on the study that you may have, at least monthly or quarterly, you would have kind of a study level kind of evaluation, safety evaluation with the medical director you may work with on your study. And so in that case, you know, you're the person responsible for what does the data show. So you're managing that data, which you should have in your day-to-day, make sure the data is accurate, make sure that it makes sense, that you've already kind of given a critical eye towards it. Because in this, you know, at this point, you're then kind of reporting surveillance, like, well, based on the data, this is what I saw. I'm noticing that, you know, these subjects are having an increase in their hemoglobin. And so everybody's anemic, you know. These are the things that you should be looking out for as far as safety goes, and that you would then be reporting this. So that's why I say to some degree, you are also a data manager, is a data analyst, I should say, as well. So I think that's where there's some interfunction in our role. Also at AbbVie, and I don't know if it's like that at other companies or in other PV sections as well, there's lots of opportunities to work on projects within our department. So whether the projects are system projects, they're planning to roll out a new system, or, you know, looking at how to improve a new system. If you want to be on part of the training team, you want to be part of the social stuff, like there's something for everybody if you want to join on something. I actually had a recent opportunity to do a cross-function project with the epidemiology department. And so what they were doing was they get this aggregate data about ICD codes, and they needed to know, what does that mean? Like, what is that, you know, in a clinical viewpoint, you know, if these people have all these ICD codes, what does that translate to? And so, you know, I raised my hand to sign up for it because it sounded like something where I would be really able to, you know, take some, I had just left clinical practice, so I could still do some clinical practice work and, you know, this new industry here. So I decided to sign up for that. And we got to work on a couple of things throughout this past, it's been maybe like 9 months or so working on that project. Where like one of our most recent ones was for interstitial lung disease. So, you know, they're asking questions about, okay, we see these ICD codes, you know, because this is information that they get from epidemiology. You know, what does that mean? Like, so does that mean you know, does that mean this patient had interstitial lung disease? Does it mean they had something else going on? Like, what does this mean? So we're able to kind of collaborate in that manner, you know, to kind of help them with their also individual projects. So that was a way to get some, data analysts, even from being a safety analyst.
Yes, what I like what you said about that is that audience listening, it is clinical research, whatever role you're in, is continuous learning. You have to be a lifelong learner, no matter what you do, right? No matter what credential you have or all those things. We got some questions coming in. We're going to ask later. I'm going to give it over to Courtney in a minute. But just understand, like, that was very important, that no matter what role you have, there are so many avenues you can go in clinical research, no matter where you are. And so thank you for showing that, like, you can work on different projects. And maybe you might say, oh, wow, I actually like that, right? I like doing that work, right? Or maybe that's something I can do, and I didn't know I was really good at that. So just think about that in terms of, there's not just one linear way of your career in clinical research. There's so many opportunities that you can have. And I thought BWICR, the annual conference, showed us that as well. So I'm going to save that question. I saw your question, Tiara, but we're going to save that for a little bit. So I'm going to give it over to Courtney to ask a few more questions, because can y'all believe it? We almost done. So Courtney, I'm gonna let you take it over. Thank you so much, my dear. And thank you, Courtney and Shola, for answering all my questions. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, yes, thank you, ladies. And Courtney, I was wondering where you went, because you just left the crew, and I was like, now where did you go?
I snuck out.
Didn't say bye or nothing.
I snuck out.
Y'all, I
Yes,
met Courtney. We actually worked together, and I didn't realize I knew her, but now I know her for real. So here we are. So now I know it. So Sheldon, you were talking about being able to be on certain projects where you are able to help develop certain things and maybe fix programs, which I don't know if you saw, but you kind of had my mouth open, because that's like what I really love to do. So I guess what I really would like to know is, from your standpoint, for someone who's been in it for a little bit longer than Courtney, how do you stay up on the current technologies to be able to help in that aspect? And Courtney, how do you feel like you would be able to force yourself into the realm of being more technologically savvy to be able to stay up in the future? Sheldon, please, if you don't mind starting first.
I will say there was a big learning curve into this role, and still, even in a year and a half in, there is still a lot of learning to be had. So
yeah,
I would say the approaches I take, like when I was practicing clinically, like, I was reading medical journals, I had, medical news like coming in my inbox, like all these ways that I kind of stayed on top of things, where I don't quite feel like I have the time to do that in this field. So I aspire to do that one day. However, for right now, I just kind of rely on the trainings and other information sessions, I would say, that's kind of offered within AbbVie. So, I mean, we probably have some type of training session like every week, if not every other week, honestly. So they're like on the knowledge management. They're on it.
Yes.
So definitely that's one way that I kind of stay on top of like what's happening, what's the change. But as far as like what might be out there, what might be coming into the clinical research realm as far as technology goes, I haven't been able to kind of just stay up on top of that for right now. So short answer.
And I second that.
Okay.
But like Sheldon said, our company is very up on technology and making sure that we are acquiring knowledge pretty regularly. It's available. If you just know where to find it, it's available. So, I use my resources on my team, people that I work with, practice, just get in there, play around, and I use my resources. I'll play around with it for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'm like, all right, it's taking too much time. Let me hit up this person, because it is a lot to learn, and you want to be efficient. But whether it's within your company or outside your company, LinkedIn has courses, Coursera. I mean, you can find YouTube, whatever. You can find, if you want to learn more about a particular system or get more, just learning how to work more efficiently, the information's out there. But time is always a challenge. You know, when I was a clinician working 3 days a week, I had all the time in the world, I felt like. Um,
Yes.
but you know, this Monday through Friday is something else. You
Yeah.
know, and with a family and all that, it's like I'm trying to keep up my PA credentials too. I got CMEs I gotta do for that. And yeah. So, you know, I get it when I can.
I
Recommend
you.
too. So, you know, I think it was great that Courtney was able to attend the last conference where,
Oh yeah.
you know, typically at
Conferences. Yes.
conferences, they're definitely talking about what's kind of latest, what's greatest. And that's another way I'd recommend. And again, I would aspire to be able to kind of stay on top of new technology.
Right, right. And then of course, we also are learning and growing Black women in clinical research. So there's going to be more opportunities for lunch and learns, more opportunities to gain certificates, more opportunities to just get together and do some peer review type things, or, you know, some study sessions, some information sessions, whatever you feel like you need to get yourself to that next level is like, that's what we want to hear. That's what we want to be able to bring to our members. And, you know, we don't just want it to be a selling point, but we want to make sure that you're getting your bang for your buck. So it's like, if you are having such a passion for the role, it's like, why not give you the opportunity to be able to continue your education and still get the CEUs you need to keep up your licensures and all the things, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yep.
So, all right. So at the conference, we discussed AI in clinical trials. How do you see the integration of AI impacting the role of clinical safety analysts? And do you see it impacting it in the near future, currently, or far, far, far in the future? Courtney, you can start, please.
Okay. So I don't have too much to say about this because I'm not as well versed on the topic. However, I will say that it has come up in discussions in my department, I believe. I don't know if it was a one-on-one conversation I had with another analyst, but you know, she was just expressing concerns that, you know, will our job go away at some point? Will they not need us to do this? And I think I'm not concerned about that, only because there are just certain things that need a human, I don't want to say a human touch, but you you know, AI can help automate, I would say, you know, maybe some of the mundane tasks that people will spend time doing that can be better spent, you know, making decisions and acting on those decisions versus you know, I don't think AI can take my place as far as, does this make sense from a clinical standpoint? You know, so I don't think that the role will go away. I think if anything, it can help you know, just help us work more efficiently and take away some of the maybe mundane tasks that we may have to do, or anyone in safety has to do. I think it can only help just increase the integrity of the data and just make things more efficient. But you know, I think AI is a great tool, but you can't take away that that human, you know, brain, that thinking, that critical thinking, you know, that you need.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. You know, first I'll say, you know, you ask like, is this a now thing or is this a future thing? If you're not thinking that it's a now thing, you're already behind. So like AI is here to stay. What you need to do is figure out how you're going to adapt around AI, you know, as far as like what you're doing in roles or roles that you're getting ready to think, you know, that you want to aspire to. I agree with Courtney that I don't think it'll take away that extra medical critical thinking that we do in our role. So I'm not too concerned about that, but our company is a big adapter of AI. They've already found ways to, you know, adapt it for different things. We have our own AbbVie chat GPT as well, you know. And there talked about like Courtney mentioned earlier about narratives that would contribute to, you know, the clinical study report. They're already talking about how they can put that into use, you know, for narratives, which can kind of be tedious as a safety analyst to do.
That
So
was
that's
amazing.
Yeah, that's a great way to already just, you know, like take away some of those mundane tasks that you talked about. So, all in all, I'll say AI is here to stay. You
It
should be looking at ways to make AI, said in a comment, to help you work smarter, not harder. And
yes,
if your job is kind of made of mundane tasks, I suggest you start looking for something else or make yourself needed.
Mhm.
absolutely. And it's just so great that you guys like hit the nail on the head on points that we spoke about during that breakout session. For you to not be present, it just automatically tells you that everything that was going on with the conference this year was aligned with where we're going in clinical research. We're never going to put you behind the curve. We're always going to set you ahead of the curve if we can. If not, we real close to it. Okay. We are trying to stay fresh and very much so up to date so that we can make ourselves useful in more ways than one. If you know better, you do better, right? We can take these things to places we could never even dream of to make healthcare so much better. And I just appreciate you guys for what you do, because I just came back from a site visit literally this morning, and I had to explain to my coordinator what one of the safety analysts was asking. I understand.
We appreciate you.
And so,
Yes.
right. So, you know, we're not supposed to tell them as CRAs, I can't tell you,
Right.
feed you, but being able to kind of understand the person behind the computer and to really say, no, baby, like, okay, come on, here's the little breadcrumb, pick it up. All right.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay, so maybe I'm not off in my thinking and helping guiding them, because I mean, Courtney, we've talked.
Mhm,
We're just,
mhm.
you
Yeah.
know,
And to that point, I told her, somebody's point, I just wanted to say this. Even though I'm not a clinician anymore, I remember telling my husband when I first started this position, I'm still seeing patients. They're just not right in front of me.
absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
You
I,
know,
Absolutely.
I do. That was,
which I can appreciate, because I became a clinician for a reason. Right now, I just don't have to touch them. I just don't have to touch them. Which
gosh, I love that. That
after COVID, I appreciate that.
And that's a great way to end it and actually go into questions that we have from the chat. I thought I pinned it, but I think you have it, Tiffany, if you don't
Yes,
mind.
I do. So this actually goes back to the first question that Tiara in our audience actually asked about credentials. So for clinical safety analysts, do you need to have a licensed credential like an RN or a PA, NP, any of those things? And this is not critical, but I always, again, going back to resumes, don't apply for a job if you don't have the minimum qualifications. And so for a clinical safety analyst, I can only assume you're looking at clinical data. So kind of walking me through what the minimum qualifications are that you see for this type of role.
Yes, at minimum, you need some type of clinical experience. And you'll see
Okay.
on job postings for this that they say some type of health science background is required, you know? So whether they might list it out, but a lot of times whether that's RN, physician, PA, nurse practitioner, pharmacist,
Pharmacy, yeah.
even dental. When I was getting hired, my manager currently who interviewed me, also had kind of mentioned that we have one dentist working on our team too. So, but the clinical, you need, it's a clinical safety analyst role. You need to have a clinical experience at minimum. And then the other would be some type of clinical research experience as well. So,
yeah. So another question we got, Tommy, and I feel like this kind of goes into your question, because what about someone who maybe has experience in clinical research, right? So I'm gonna take me for example, and tell me, Tiffany answers now. I've been doing regulatory affairs for 20 years now, right? So I do know clinical work. I know clinical safety. I'm not licensed though, right? And this is like, when I say a fair question, if the answer is no, I like to be honest with my audience here. If someone say they have experience in clinical research, but they don't have clinical experience, is there a pathway that you think they can maybe work towards, or should they get some type of credential, like go back to school or, and this is like a personal advice question. Like, again, everyone, this is not like you must do that, but in your experience, if someone said, you know, I don't really have that experience, but I really want to get into this role, you know, maybe Courtney, what would you even say to that? Like, what do you think?
So y'all got me wanting to find a job description and look, because I know, well, for this particular role, and we're just one role. So I'll just say clinical trial patient safety falls under the big pharmacovigilance umbrella. And there are so many roles. It may not be this particular role, but we mentioned earlier these safety data architects that we work with very closely. Like I said, we can't tell you exactly what they do.
Right.
But I don't think they need a clinical background, if I'm not mistaken. So there are lots of opportunities in safety that may not be the clinical safety analyst, but, you know, I've seen roles like pharmacovigilance associate, you know, drug safety associate, drug safety specialist. I actually, before I left my prior company, I was looking at I think it was called a drug safety specialist or something. Like, it's so many different titles, and, you know, we can't get hung up on the title, you know, anyway, because at one company it might be one thing and another company might be another. But I think for this particular role, I do think you need some sort of patient care experience, because they want somebody that with that clinical knowledge. But within pharmacovigilance, which we fall under that, you don't necessarily need to have, you know, an RN or a PharmD or something like that to get in there if you're really passionate about ensuring that drugs are safe when they hit.
And thank you for saying that. And this just, I think, is a testament again to BWICR that we have such vast experience. And if you don't have it, right, you don't have it. So like the thing about that, like I personally, Tiffany, would never apply for a clinical safety analyst because the answer is no. Like I just really know, right? Like I don't know those clinical, you have to be able to read notes, and I can read a note, but what you see in a note and what I see in a note from a regulatory is totally different.
Right.
And how to just interpret labs and things like that, that are things that are, again, if we all think while we go into clinical research, patient safety, do you feel comfortable going into a role saying, you know what, I feel comfortable looking at this patient's information and making a determination, right? Which is a big deal, right?
Because we do look at labs, we look at vital signs, we look at, you know, EKG interpretations, you know, it's a lot of clinical stuff, you know. So
which, honey, Tiffany Jones says, honey, back away. Go ahead, Sheldon, what you got?
And I was gonna say, like, for me, you know, I didn't even know a lot of these roles even existed. So I actually signed up for, I forget what the actual what it's called, but it was like career options with Danielle. I forget what it's called exactly, sorry. So where, you know, she kind of talked about what kind of experience you have, what kind of transferable skills you have. Here's some kind of, you know, different roles that maybe, you know, you might be interested in or might qualify for. And she connected me with the recruiter at AbbVie. And so what I did, I spoke to him and gave him my resume and, you know, talked about what kind of skills that I had. And he basically, I kind of did, there weren't many interviews, but somewhat, you know, them learning about me, but also me learning about, you know, these type of roles. And so I had actually done a couple of those within AbbVie, and then, you know, then kind of got into this role. So that's also the thing too, where, yeah, you may not have these specific skills for this specific role, but there's, like Courtney said, plenty of other roles under the PV umbrella that you know, you probably could qualify for.
Thank you all so much for saying that. Danielle, I know you're like behind the scenes, but I feel like she wants to chime in. I don't know. Danielle, what do you think?
Yeah, so I know people were asking what type of experience do you need for this role. So AbbVie had reached out to me and told me that they were looking for nurses and physician assistants. So they were really looking for specific skills, and usually you don't have this with the clinical research industry, just being honest. Usually you don't have someone saying, I'm looking for this person that was in this role so that they can be a clinical, why am I getting clinical? Yes, Yes, thank you. So they reached out to me, and so when they reached out to me, and I just started thinking about, okay, who have I talked to that may be interested in this role? Who has this background? And so because Abby told me that they were specifically looking for these people with the skills, I reached out to Shelda, I reached out to Courtney, and I made these introductions. And this I really feel like is important, especially with Black women in clinical research, because it's not enough a lot of times to just give someone a referral. A lot of times you have to go a step further than that. If you really want to help your fellow Black women in clinical research member, that's really what it's all about. So I did an introduction between Shelda and the recruiter, and I said, you told me this is what you're looking for. Here is Shelda, she has this experience, and it went from there. He asked for her resume, she had that exploratory call, and because she had the call went so well, they when a position opened up, they remember that conversation that they had with Shelda. So it's a lot of times you have to go a step further. And I, just with having BWICR and just because of the conversations that I've had with a lot of the members, you guys have shared with me what you're going through, what you're dealing with at your company. So I take all of this. I always say like this, I carry y'all in my pocket wherever I go because I remember these conversations. And when I'm talking to people at these companies, I'm like, okay, yes, I had a conversation with Shelda. Okay, yes, Courtney told me this is what she's looking for. Because I remember I used to talk to Courtney. Courtney like, okay, Danielle, I'm looking for, I want to be more fulfilled. I want to be challenged. So like I'm remembering these conversations and making these introductions to help everyone with their career. So once Shelda, did that appointment with me, we went on a whole plan. Okay, what are the roles that you can apply to? Looking at your skills. And so that's a lot of times, what we're doing when we're having that one-on-one conversation. You get that individualized help that can help you land a new position in the industry. So that's all I wanted to add. I love the fact that Abby was able to reach out to me and tell me that this is the type of people that they were looking for, because had they not reached out to me, who knows where, like
Right.
where everyone would be. So I'm extremely thankful, and I'm extremely thankful for the ladies even listening to me when I reach out to them and tell them like, hey, I know a perfect role for you. So I think it also is a level of being open and receptive to the conversation as well, because but like they said, I had no idea what this role was before Abby reached out to me and told me what they were looking for.
No,
But
thank you for saying that. Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you, Courtney.
oh yeah, I'm sorry. I want to add in too. It also kind of hones in on the fact that when we all talk to each other, we really do listen. We really do listen. When we stop and we talk to you guys and we hold your hand and we look at you in your face and we hug each other and we say, we got you. We're not just saying we got you. We really, really do got you. And we think about you and we're like, oh, I remember, because this is what we want for all of us. We mean it. We mean what we say. Let us be the family we want to be, y'all.
Right. Yeah, no. And so, no, thank you, Danielle, for saying that. And again, like, you are intentional. Like Danielle, literally, when I said I was looking for this, she would always send me like, so don't ask for something you don't want the answer to, right? So like when I say, you know what, I'm looking for this, she would send me all the time. And she gets, and she won't say it, but I know it, hundreds of emails, DMs every day. And so, Tiffany, have you seen this? Tiffany, you seen this? Tiffany, link with this person. And so if you're not ready for that information that's going to be given to you and you're not ready to jump on that and do it, like just don't do that. But also be intentional in that what you're looking for, because Danielle knows you, but only in the context of BWICR, right? So when she gives a referral, it really is on her. But it's up to us to make sure that we follow up with what she even said about us. Like, well, they're part of BWICR. Even if that's all she says, that alone takes a lot of weight that other people don't have. So we have to make sure that we're up to par in terms of, okay, I'm ready for this, right? And our personal experience, I do medical writing, and she would send me that. But I learned quickly that what they were looking for, I don't have a PhD. But I learned that already, like, okay, well, that's not why I'm getting it. Not that I didn't get a role doing that, because I did, but I had to like maneuver my way around that because that's not what they were looking for, right? So if someone is looking for that, just be intentional in that's what you want to do. So I have another question for you, Sheldon and Courtney. Someone asked Ombre, I want to make sure I say it right. Are there any certifications or professional development experiences that could help you qualify for a role like this? And I kind of know we kind of talked about that already, and like getting some type of clinical background, but more importantly, going from direct patient care into research, do you feel fulfilled in your job that you're doing? That's even a more important question. How does that feel for you, going from not direct patient care to now doing this indirect patient care? Both of you can answer. So whoever wants to go first.
I'll let Sheldon take that one.
I want to talk about the certifications. I think I see your question, certifications and professional development part of it. So actually, when I was working in clinical, practicing clinically as well, I also was just a person that, like, there's a work stream coming up, there's a project or something that you can work with. Like, I just always found myself just getting into stuff. And so before I left, I actually just took a position as the Charlotte market lead PA nurse practitioner. So when I connected with the recruiter at Abbey, they were looking for a manager role. That's what they were interviewing me for, actually, but I didn't have enough clinical research years of experience. So this is how I end up in this the senior CSA role. So I do want to say, yeah, there are professional development, like just doing. And I found that even in clinical care, just kind of doing the basic, all right, I'm going to school, I'm going to work, and I'm just seeing patients is just not really gonna kind of cut it, because everybody else is doing that. So you kind of do need to, find little projects, set yourself apart, and getting these other experiences that can be free. It does take a little bit more of your time. Of course, it's not always paid, but those are the things that can kind of set you up for the future. So any kind of like leadership experience, Black Women in Clinical Research sends out like, hey, there's a free research certificate. I know like Duke had one. Yes, Duke. Duke had one. So something like that. So any opportunity where there's some type of like training module or a certificate, or here's a session, take advantage of all of those things, because you can put them on your resume and say, hey, look, I got clinical research experience. Hey, I even got a certification to show that, and then from professional development, other ways, you can sometimes land yourself in a role. Like I said, they were looking for a manager, and I had, this experience with leadership. And so that kind of, also gave me a like, well, dang, we can't really give you that role, but, we want you here. So here's something else you can do, so there's that. As far as the fulfillment question, I'm just going to say that for me, I just never want my job to be the whole of me. So it is probably maybe 1/8 of what I'm about. So, I feel fulfilled in all aspects of my life. So when clinical work was getting rough and I was feeling burnt out, I'm involved in lots of organizations, I'm fulfilled by my friends, my family. There's just so many other things to be fulfilled about that I didn't let that one thing kind of consume me. So generally, I can't say that I feel fulfilled in the work. I'm fulfilled overall. So that's just one part of the pie.
Yeah, oh man, you hit it right on. I think that fulfillment, I think that it definitely depends on the stage you are in life. I think is how much focus you may put into your job and finding fulfillment in that. And I'll just be transparent. There was a time where I was putting way too much emphasis on that. But I think, as long as you are, feel like you're making a difference in some way, which I still feel like I'm not seeing the patient in front of me, I'm not touching them, I'm not diagnosing them, but the work that I do is still impacting patients in some way. So I'm cool with that. And like Shelda said, finding that fulfillment in, friends, family, things you're doing outside of work. It's a means to an end, we're gonna keep it real here. It is.
And that's okay. That's okay.
Right. But as long as you're, happy with the work that you're doing and find other ways to be productive in that job. Because, some of our tasks, can be mundane, but getting involved in other projects where you're really seeing the impact that you make can make that experience a little richer. For sure.
Yes, this has been amazing, and literally you all have given me an extra 11 minutes of your time, and I do respect your time. And I know I'm not speaking for Courtney and Danielle, but this was great. Like in every career event that we have is great, but this was just so transparent and just insightful and valuable. And I just want to thank you both for coming on. I hope this isn't the last time y'all going to speak. Thank you so much. Add it to your resumes, okay? So I want to see y'all speak some more. That's just me saying that. I'm gonna let Courtney end it. I know Danielle's going to say she don't want to say anything, but she's going to because I'm gonna make her. So Courtney, you can take the floor, and then we'll give it to Danielle, and then we'll let you all go home and enjoy the rest of your evening.
I just thank y'all for just, well, Shadow saying, thank y'all for joining us tonight. Thank you.
Danielle, you got to say at least one word too. One word.
I put the shocked emoji. I'm gonna be like, thank you everyone for coming out. Good night and peace. But in all seriousness, thank you, ladies, for sharing your knowledge, and thank you everyone for attending. Please make sure that you reach out to Shelda and Courtney. You know, we are having these career conversations, not just, you know, to have the meeting, but we want you to connect afterwards. We want you to have, if you have questions, if you're interested in this role, connect with the people that are in the role. That increases your chances of getting into this role as well. So you have to talk to the people. I know that this is, you know, I want to, you know, tell people that networking is such a huge part of being in the clinical research industry. So if you want a role, you need to talk to the people that are in the role. You need to talk to people that work at that company that you're interested in. So go a step further. When you are really focused and intentional on your career, you have to take your networking to the next level. So step outside your comfort zone. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, then it means that you're doing something right. So take that extra step, reach out to Courtney, reach out to Shelda, reach out to anyone, you know, within BWICR if you have questions. The last thing that we want you to do is to be out there struggling alone and feeling like you don't have any support. So if you let us know what you need help with, we are going to do everything within our power to help you.
So I
And
couldn't
she
have said
means
it
that.
better. Honey, we are all testament. Literally, everybody who's spoken today are testament to what Danielle has done and her influence. It's just a fact, right? And so you are in a good space, and everybody who comes here, the more you come to these things, the more you will meet people, the more you will network. That's just how it works, right? So make sure that you always look out for these type of events, anything that BWICR is doing, anything that people drop in the app, in the LinkedIn group, in the Facebook group, in the chat, anything. Just make sure that you're always aware of what's going on in your own local community too as well. So it's 45 after. We got 15 minutes that we took over. Thank you all so much. I dropped their Shelda and Courtney's LinkedIn for you. Please make sure you get it. I'm going to let everyone go. It has been great, and I will see you all next Wednesday on Wind Down Wednesday.